A man locked his gate, walked into his bedroom, lay down on his bed, and the world never saw him again. Not for 1 year, not for 2, not even for 3. It would take almost 4 full years before anyone discovered what had happened to Mr. John Aderemi Abiola inside that silent house in the Adeosun, Ide-Orogbo community in Ido local government area of Oyo State, Nigeria. And when they finally found him, what was left of him would leave even the strongest men in that compound completely speechless. Before we get into what they found, let us take you back to the beginning, because this story did not start with a mystery. It started with a man, a quiet, hard-working man who simply wanted to live life on his own terms. And that decision, as private and personal as it was, would become the reason nobody knew he was gone. Mr. John Aderemi Abiola was 67 years old. He was an engineer by profession, a man who had spent most of his working life in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, where he built his career and his reputation. People who knew him from those days described him as focused, disciplined, and extremely private. He was not the kind of man who shared his business with others. He did not gather in groups to gossip. He did not host parties or invite neighbors over for meals. He was a man who knew what he wanted, kept to himself, and expected others to do the same. At some point in his life, his marriage ended. He and his wife separated. She stayed behind in Port Harcourt in a story building they had built together, while he made the decision to start fresh somewhere else. He chose Ibadan, the city known for its red rooftops and its relaxed pace of life. He had lived in several parts of Ibadan before making his final decision. He wanted to own something solid, something that was completely his. And so he began building a house in the Adeosun, Ide-Orogbo community in Ido local government area of Oyo State, Nigeria. The house, when it was finished, reflected everything about the man who built it. The fence surrounding the compound was extremely high, so high that it reached almost to the level of the roof of the building. The gate was solid iron, no gaps, no openings, no way for anyone passing by to peek inside and see what was happening within the compound. From the outside, you could walk past that house 100 times and never know if there was someone inside or not. That was exactly how Mr. Abiola wanted it. He valued his privacy above almost everything else. He had even told people that he planned to build a second structure on the property so that tenants could live there with him, just to have some company around. He had started making plans for it, but life, as it often does, had other ideas. Mr. Abiola moved into the house in July 2017. He was known in the community for one thing: paying his dues. Every levy the Landlords Association raised, he paid without complaint. He attended just one meeting of the Landlords Association during his entire time living there. He exchanged greetings with neighbors when their paths crossed, but that was as far as it went. Nobody knew much about his family. Nobody knew where exactly his children were. He had mentioned once, while a worker was present, that he had 2 children living in the United States of America. He had even called his daughter on the phone right there in front of the worker, and they had spoken for a long time. But to his neighbors, to the community around him, he was simply the quiet man behind the tall fence. One person who had a slightly closer connection to him was a furniture maker named Mohammed Aderemi Adimola, who had done carpentry work inside the house, building doors and wardrobes for the property. Mr. Adimola had interacted with Mr. Abiola during that period and had seen the kind of man he was. He later recalled that the last time he saw Mr. Abiola alive was in 2018, shortly before the Eid celebration. Mr. Abiola had told him he was traveling to Port Harcourt and would not be gone for more than 2 weeks. He said he would be back in time to celebrate in Ibadan. Mr. Adimola and others in the community waited. Days passed, weeks passed, Mr. Abiola did not return. At first, no one was alarmed. The man traveled frequently for work. His gate, locked and sealed as always, gave no indication whether he was inside or had left. People in the community simply assumed he was still in Port Harcourt. Maybe work had extended. Maybe he had taken ill. Maybe he had decided to stay longer than planned. Life was busy, and not many people had the time or the close connection with Mr. Abiola to press the question further. And so, without anyone realizing it, weeks turned into months, months turned into a year, then 2 years, then 3. The house stood silent, the gate remained locked, and inside, behind those tall walls and that solid iron gate, something was slowly, quietly happening. Something that no one on the outside could see, hear, or smell. At least, not yet. Because nature does not wait, and while the community went about its daily life, the compound of Mr. John Aderemi Abiola was changing. The grass that no one was cutting began to grow, then it grew taller, then it spread, then it thickened into bush, and then slowly but surely, that bush became something else entirely. By the time the year 2020 arrived, something had changed about the compound at Adeosun Idiorogbo community. People walking past could see it clearly now. The weeds and wild plants inside the compound had grown so tall, so thick, and so out of control that they were no longer staying inside the fence. They were climbing over it. Branches and leaves were reaching out into the street, over the walls, growing into the spaces of neighboring properties. The compound no longer looked like a home, it looked like a piece of abandoned forest had appeared in the middle of a residential area. The landlords in the community began talking. They held a meeting to decide what should be done. The compound was becoming an eyesore. It was also becoming a concern. Where was Mr. Abiola? Why had no one seen him? Why was his compound turning into a jungle? Some suggested breaking into the compound to clear the bush, but then the conversation shifted. What if they broke in and got into legal trouble? What if Mr. Abiola came back and reported them to the police? These fears were enough to make them pause. They decided to wait and see. And so, they waited. The bush kept growing. Then, about 2 years before what would become a shocking discovery, a new family moved into the house right next to Mr. Abiola's compound. The man had just finished building his own home and was excited to settle in with his wife and children. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter, but very quickly that excitement began to crack and crumble. Almost from the moment they moved in, the family began experiencing a problem that made peaceful living nearly impossible. Snakes. Not once, not twice, regularly. Snakes were coming over from the overgrown compound next door and entering their property. And these were not small snakes. Some of them were large, some of them were dangerous. Along with the snakes came other reptiles crawling their way through the thick vegetation that had turned the neighboring compound into a wildlife zone. Every time the children wanted to go outside to play, their parents had to check the compound first. Every time someone stepped out of the house at night, they had to be careful. The family was living in fear inside their own home, a home the father had worked hard to build. He endured it for as long as he could, but there's a limit to how long a man can watch his family live in constant danger before he decides that enough is enough. He filed a formal complaint with the Landlords Association. He explained everything: the snakes, the reptiles, the constant fear, the sleepless nights. He demanded that something be done about the abandoned compound next door. This time around, the Landlords Association did not hesitate. This was no longer just a matter of an abandoned compound. This was a matter of public safety. Right here, before we go further into this story, we need to stop and ask you something important. If you are watching this right now and you have not yet subscribed to Top Reality Pulse TV, please do it now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification bell. Here's why this matters. We bring you real stories, true stories, stories that happen to real people in real communities across Nigeria and beyond. We do not make these up. We research them, we verify them, we tell them to you straight so that you can learn, stay informed, and stay safe. Every week we publish new stories just like this one, and if you are not subscribed, you will miss them. So subscribe now and let us continue. The Landlords Association went to the Akobo police station. They explained the situation to the police and formally requested permission to break into the compound and clear the bush. The police listened carefully to everything they were told, then they gave their approval. With the backing of law enforcement, the community could now legally enter the property and deal with the problem. The date was set: Sunday, September 4th, 2022. On that morning, the Landlords Association arrived at the property with hired laborers, cutlasses, and tools. There was a sense of purpose in the air. Finally, after years of watching that compound turn into a jungle, something was going to be done about it. But when they reached the gate, they hit their first obstacle. The gate was locked, and no one had a key. They had no choice. They forced the gate open.
When they stepped inside, something stopped them almost immediately. Something that none of them had expected, something that changed the entire mood of that day in an instant. The gate had been locked from the inside. That's not how you lock a gate when you are leaving a property. You lock from the inside when you are still inside, which meant that whoever had locked that gate last was standing on the inside of this compound when they did it. But where were they now? The laborers began their work, cutting through the thick, wild growth that had swallowed the compound. As the bush fell away, more things began to appear. A car, parked in the compound, covered in dust and vegetation, untouched clearly for a very long time. The concern among those present grew heavier with every passing minute. They kept cutting, they kept clearing, and slowly the main building itself began to come into view. That was when one of the landlords, Mohammed Adiremi Adimola, the same furniture maker who had once built the doors and wardrobes of this house, noticed something. One of the windows of the house was open and the curtain inside had been pushed to the side. He walked closer. He used a cutlass from one of the laborers and used it to cut through the mosquito net covering the open window. Then he leaned forward and looked inside. What he saw would change everyone present that day in ways they would never fully recover from.
Mohammed Ademola looked through that window and saw a skeleton. Not a partial skeleton, a complete one. The full skeletal remains of a human being stretched out flat on the bed, facing upward toward the ceiling, as if the person had simply lain down to rest and never got back up. Around the waist area, the faded remains of boxer shorts could still be made out. The fabric of whatever top had been worn had long since broken down completely. Only a tiny scrap of material remained beside the body. On the skull, the teeth were still visible, exposed and white against the dark, decomposed surroundings. For a moment, Ademola could not speak. Then he raised an alarm. The other landlords ran to the window. One by one, they looked inside. One by one, the same silence fell over each of them. Nobody wanted to say out loud what they were all already thinking, that the man they had assumed was somewhere in Port Harcourt living his private life had never left this compound at all. News spread through the community like fire. The chairman of the Landlords Association immediately called the divisional police officer in charge of Akobo division. The DPO, a woman named Grace, wasted no time. She sent detectives to the scene without delay. When the police entered the apartment, they confirmed what had been seen through the window. The skeleton was there, exactly as described. But as the detectives began examining the room more carefully, they found more details that helped them begin piecing together what had happened. Beside the remains were 3 mobile phones. One was positioned near the left side of the body, one was near the right side, and the third, this one stood out, was behind the skull, still plugged into the wall socket, still connected as though someone had placed it there to charge before going to sleep. On the bedside table and around the room, investigators found a bottle of antihistamine medication, packets of bicarbonate of soda, vitamin C tablets, anti-malarial drugs, and a sachet of herbal tea. A plasma television was still mounted on the wall. The wardrobe still had clothes hanging in it. A laptop computer was also found in the room. Everything was exactly where it had been left. Nothing was scattered, nothing was broken. There were no signs of a struggle anywhere in the room. Nothing in the living room had been disturbed either. It was as if time had simply stopped in this house while the rest of the world moved on without it. Then the detectives found something in a wallet on the table, a driver's license. The name on the license read John Aderemi Abiola. Date of birth, October 1st, 1955. That made him 67 years old. According to community members, he had last been seen alive around December 2018. That meant his remains had been lying in that bedroom undiscovered for close to 4 years. Now, we want to pause here and ask you something, and this one is important. In the comment section below this video, write down the year you think Mr. Abiola passed. Was it 2018, 2019, or do you think something else happened here? Drop your answer below. We read every single comment and we want to hear what you think. The next challenge for the police was finding Mr. Abiola's family. This turned out to be far more difficult than identifying him. The phone numbers retrieved from his identity cards and the phones found in the room had all become inactive after years of no use. When detectives managed to reach one of the numbers, the person who answered seemed confused by the questions. The number had been reassigned to someone else entirely.
Neighbors and workers who had interacted with Mr. Abiola, the bricklayer, the welder, the mechanic, all said the same thing. The man never shared personal information about his family with anyone. He was intensely private. But the police kept pushing. After days of investigation and cross-referencing, they finally managed to locate members of Mr. Abiola's family. The family confirmed his identity, they confirmed he had last been seen around 2018, and when they spoke about him, a fuller picture of who John Aderimi Abiola was began to form. His cousin revealed that from a young age, Mr. Abiola had always preferred to be alone. He was not someone who chased relationships or sought out company. After his first marriage ended, his family had encouraged him to find another partner. They had even offered to help him find a wife. He declined. He simply was not interested. He had told people, in his own quiet way, that he was fine on his own. The family had worried about this. They had been the ones who suggested he build his second structure on his property, a smaller building where tenants could stay, so that he would at least have other people around him. Not too close, but close enough. He had agreed to the idea and had started making moves to carry it out, but the building was never completed. He passed before it could be finished. His older brother offered a different perspective. According to him, Mr. Abiola had been a warm and connected man until a difficult chapter in his marriage changed him. After the separation, the brother said, Abiola pulled back from everyone, his family, his friends, everyone. He relocated to Ibadan and built his house without telling most of his family where exactly he was living. He had mentioned to one worker that he would let the family know his address later, but later never came. He had also been managing high blood pressure. People who knew him said he was careful about it. He would move away from dusty areas during construction work, saying plainly that at his age, he could not afford to stress his lungs or his heart. He was cautious, he was careful, he was trying to live well, which makes the picture of what likely happened both deeply sad and deeply human. The position of his body, lying flat, facing upward, no signs of struggle, no sign that he had tried to get up or call for help, suggests that whatever happened to him came quickly. Perhaps he lay down to rest one evening. Perhaps he was not feeling well. Perhaps his heart simply gave out in the night, quietly and without warning, while he slept alone in his bedroom behind that tall fence and that solid gate that kept the world out so effectively. And the world, for nearly 4 years, did not even notice he was gone.
When the Oyo State Commissioner of Police received news of what had been found in the Adeosun and Idiorogbo community, he immediately directed that the case be transferred to the State Criminal Investigation Department, the SCID, for a full and thorough investigation. The directive was clear: determine exactly how John Aderemi Abiola passed and ensure that every angle was properly examined. The compound was cordoned off, and the surrounding area was placed under restriction in the interest of public health and safety. By the time the remains were found, the body had long completed the natural process of decomposition. A forensic examination would be needed to determine the exact cause of passing. The family, once located and brought up to speed on everything that had happened, made arrangements for his burial. Mr. John Aderemi Abiola was laid to rest inside his own compound, the same compound he had built with his own hands, the same compound where he had spent his final days, and the same compound where he had lain undiscovered for almost 4 years. There was something deeply painful about that. He had come to Ibadan to build something. He had worked hard, saved his money, designed a home that reflected exactly who he was, and in the end, that same home became the place where he was found and where he was buried. The community was left shaken, not just by the discovery itself, but by everything the discovery represented. Here was a man who lived among them. He paid his dues faithfully. He exchanged greetings when they crossed paths. He had a car in his compound. He had a television on his wall and clothes in his wardrobe. He had children in another country and a phone that had once been plugged in and charging. He had been a living, breathing, thinking human being, and not a single person in that community had known he was gone. Think about that for a moment. A man can be so isolated, so completely cut off from the people around him, that he can pass from this world and nobody, not a neighbor, not a friend, not a community member, not even a family member, realizes it for 4 years. 4 years.
That is not a matter of days or weeks where someone might be away on a trip. That is 4 full years of silence, and nobody came looking. How does something like that happen? There is no single answer. It is a combination of things: his own deep preference for privacy, the design of a compound that was built to keep the outside world out, a separation from his family that had slowly become a permanent distance, and a community that, while not uncaring, simply did not have enough of a connection with this particular man to notice when the rhythm of his presence stopped. His family had tried in their own way. They had encouraged him to remarry. They had suggested the tenant building so that he would not be alone. They had been concerned about him, but the distance he had placed between himself and everyone else was wide enough that when he needed to be found, it took 4 years and a complaint about snakes for anyone to get close enough to look. And this brings us to what this story is really about. This is not a story of wrongdoing. There is no criminal here. There is no one to arrest, no one to charge, no one to blame in the traditional sense. This is a story about something quieter and in many ways more uncomfortable, the very real danger of extreme isolation. It is a story about what can happen when a person builds walls, literal and figurative, so high that no one can reach them even when they need to be reached the most. We live in a world that is becoming more and more disconnected, even as we become more and more connected through our phones and our social media pages. We can have hundreds of contacts saved in our phones and still be completely alone in moments that matter. Mr. Abiola had phones, he had family, he had neighbors, he had a community around him, and yet in the most critical moment of his life, none of that reached him. There is also a lesson here for families. Disagreements happen. Marriages end, relationships become strained, people drift apart. These are painful but human experiences. But when a family member goes silent, truly silent, for months, then years, that silence must not be allowed to continue unchallenged. A phone call, a visit, a message passed through someone who knows them, something, because the longer the silence, the more dangerous the distance becomes. There is a lesson for communities too. Mr. Abiola's neighbors were not bad people. They were cautious, worried about legal trouble, worried about doing the wrong thing. But there is a balance between respecting someone's privacy and checking on their welfare. A quiet knock on a gate, a message passed through the Landlords Association, a simple inquiry. These small things can sometimes be the difference between discovering someone in time and discovering a skeleton 4 years later. And finally, there is a lesson that is perhaps the hardest one to sit with because it is the most personal. If you are someone who lives alone, please hear this. Your life has value that goes beyond what you can accomplish by yourself. The walls we build around ourselves to keep out pain, noise, and intrusion sometimes also keep out the people who could help us in our darkest moments. Privacy is important, boundaries are healthy, but total isolation is dangerous. Tell someone you trust where you live. Stay in contact with family, even imperfectly. Let someone have a way to reach you. Let someone know when you are traveling and when to expect you back. These small acts of openness are not weaknesses, they are wisdom. They are the kinds of decisions that ensure that if something ever goes wrong, someone will know and someone will come. Mr. John Aderemi Abiola deserved better than 4 years of silence. He deserved to be found. He deserved to be mourned properly and in good time. He was a hard-working man who built a career, raised children, and constructed his own home from the ground up. His story deserved to end with family around him, not with laborers cutting through a jungle with cutlasses 4 years too late. May his soul rest in peace.